Hello, everybody. Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget.
and this is number 46 in Sounding the Shallows, isn't it?
It
I
is.
got it right.
Yeah,
People put us right, don't they?
they
We
do.
got it wrong. Right. Well, interestingly, the response to one aspect of last Friday has been amazing. I don't think we've had as many replies to the question we asked at the end of that.
Which was.
Well, it was about if it had been possible to photograph Jesus in his lifetime, if there had been cameras and we've been able to see the photographs, what would people have chosen to have? Which photograph would they like to have? And we're going to take a little more time over these today because they're absolutely fascinating.
They are. It's like having a little photo album.
It is
isn't
really, yeah. And here's the first one. As for photographs of Jesus, I think I would like to see a snap of Jesus with the disciples on the Emmaus Road at the moment in the inn when he broke bread and they recognized him. Their astonished looks and Jesus himself fading out as he did his disappearing act. That would be some picture.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
And those of you who know the Rembrandt picture of Jesus in the inn with the disciples on the Emmaus Road, that's a wonderful picture.
Yeah, he obviously enjoyed thinking about that, didn't he? And imagining it and wondering what it would have looked like.
Yeah, it was a fantastic painting. So yeah, and continuing with
absolutely.
things people said. Yeah.
The great thing is they're all different. So this one is somebody who said that she would like to see one of him with the woman caught in adultery, and actually said she'd like two, which is fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah,
She'd
fair
like
enough.
two. One of them would be the look of mercy in his eyes and the total understanding of everything that had brought her to this point. And the other one,
This
which
is
I
one
found
I really like.
absolutely writing in the sand. And she says, you know, there's a debate what he wrote, listing their sins, etc. But maybe, just maybe, she was the only one, because of her eyes being downcast with fear and shame, she would be the only one who was looking at the ground and could see it. And this person said, I like to believe he was writing, you are loved.
That's a
oh,
nice
wouldn't
thought.
that be lovely? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then a third one, my favourite picture would definitely be Jesus watching Lazarus coming out of the tomb. Yeah,
Would
I
have been
think
such a relief, apart from anything else, wouldn't it, for him?
you do get the feeling, and probably people would disagree with me. I don't know if Jesus absolutely believed Lazarus was going to come out of that tomb, but whatever. Anyway, yes, it would be wonderful to have that
Yeah.
in a book of photos. wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. Now, this one I found really interesting. I would like a picture of Jesus and me together to remind me he's there and I am okay. I think that would be reflected in loads and loads of people, actually, a sort of selfie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he goes on to say that it was a reflective service, and in the quiet he had a picture of the tomb with the door open, and he could see himself and Jesus sitting next to each other. And Jesus was doing the talking, but the person who wrote said he couldn't hear what he was saying. I don't know. He says he's never forgotten that picture, which was an imaginative picture, but that's the one he would love to have as a real photo.
Well, he says he drew it, and
He did.
He drew the picture he saw, and he still has it. And I think that yes, that would echo what a lot of people would love to have.
Would.
Yeah.
A photo.
There's
Yeah.
a photo of the boy who gave Jesus the food when he fed the 5,000, or perhaps of the children sitting at his feet, which would be wonderful, or running around his feet.
Yeah.
But
Well,
don't know how
I was
good they
thinking
were.
that, Adrian. I think if it was a real photo and not one of these beautiful pictures you used to get in Sunday school where the children were all sitting like little angels round his feet, I think the photo would have revealed the truth that if there were children around, some of them would have been concentrating and some of them would have been mucking about.
I like to think one of them in the picture would have been holding something he or she had drawn, and Jesus would have been looking at it really carefully and saying, "Oh, that's beautiful." Yeah.
And as I say, what the amazing thing is that none of them were the same. So this one is wanting a photograph of Jesus among the crowd at the pool of Bethsaida after he's healed the man, because that's where she saw him in an imaginative contemplation, in her imagination, in her thoughts, in her spirit, and at that time, she actually could see him coming over and speaking to her. And so there we go. That will be the photo. And she's in it, and so is he.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one more, Adrian.
One more. Yeah, listen to Sounding the Shadows about photos of Jesus. My favourite would be when he met the woman at the well. Imagine the headlines in the Sunday paper. Son of God meets bad woman at well.
Absolutely, I'm afraid so.
And she says, just my wild imagination. But all of the things people sent were different. But there was no doubt there was an appetite, a real appetite to have pictures of Jesus. But I wonder.
So I wonder too, because I think you have to ask yourself, if God had wanted it, if Jesus had wanted it, surely there would have been either a portrait, because they did do paintings of people at that time, or a really detailed description. So I think we probably have to ask ourselves, why isn't there? Why wasn't there some detailed description as to what Jesus looked like, the sort of face he had, the look in his eyes? And I know some of it is to do with the way the Gospels were written and the but on the other hand, I think if God had wanted it, what do you think?
I don't know. I find it really interesting. I mean, we said last week that, you know, that I mean, we've worked with a lot of kids in the past, and one or two really got up our noses, if you know what I mean. And when you see someone with a similar face, sometimes you think, oh no, it reminds me of so and so. And I wonder if you had a photo of Jesus, whether you'd say, oh, like we said last week, it looks like my Uncle George. I can't stand my Uncle George. And but more seriously, if it's focused like that, and you actually know what the face was like, I wonder whether it would have the same power as it does in its inaccessibility.
Well,
really.
That's interesting. I mean, I know that part of you feels that it would put him in history properly. It would give him a reality that some people almost question.
It does. I think we neglect the man Jesus a great deal, and throughout my Christian growing up, if that's what it is, I've moved closer and closer, as I think you have, to really beginning to love that man who came to do what he did, a very, very, very difficult job, and to know he's a man in history who did one of the most important things that's ever been done is quite something. Really.
But if you think about it, I mean, think of other people who've done things like, say, Einstein or whatever, and you get one picture that crops up every time that person is spoken about. And it may well be that person thinks, I wish that wasn't that one. And I'm thinking, you know, certainly on the news, you get the same old pictures, don't you? If ever, you know, if the royal family, same old picture comes up or whatever. And that picture will have been taken on a particular day, and the face might not look the same on another day. I mean, anybody who's had photos taken of them will know what it feels like to think, I wish I wasn't pulling that face.
Well, I think
day.
when Jesus arrived at that well, perhaps before the woman arrived, he'd just had a very long walk. He'd finally ditched the disciples by telling them all to go shopping, which was very odd.
Right.
And there he is thinking, at last.
Yes, so he wouldn't probably be having that lovely expression on his face.
So if the paparazzi had been there,
exactly,
it would have been a pretty bad...
And we would still be interpreting it. And also, I think, you know, you mentioned the Rembrandt picture.
Yeah.
Well, that's somebody who has loved the story. You can feel that. Anybody who's seen his picture of the prodigal son will know that he has a real love for the stories and for the reality of the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
But he has interpreted it, and painters and poets, writers, they've all put their own take onto it. And also, some of the most beautiful pictures that I've seen are pictures in which Jesus appears as an African or as an Indian or as somebody from another culture, of people who believe. So is that partly why? Because otherwise it would be claimed by a certain group.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned, didn't we, that apparently in Thomas More's time, the posh ladies absolutely refused to believe that Mary was a Jewess. She couldn't be. She couldn't be one of that despised race,
No.
and that's the race he came to. But yeah, it would have caused. I suppose it would have caused problems.
And you would be looking from your own point of view, wouldn't you? So the people that actually met Jesus and looked into his face. I mean, somebody thought he was connected with the devil. Somebody else thought he was a prophet. Lots of people thought he was a blasphemer. And lots of people thought he was a friend. But they were looking at the same face. And so to some extent, it's what's coming out of you that determines what you think, isn't it? And I was thinking, Adrian, I was trying to think of a time when people jumped to conclusions. And I was thinking, one of our sons was a tad accident prone, wasn't he? And I remember one time taking him to A&E. Now, he'd been camping out with his cousins in our garden the night before, and he was incredibly grubby. He had not yet had a wash, and then he managed to fall on some milk bottles, and I had to rush him to hospital. And as I arrived at A&E, I looked at this child that was still absolutely filthy from them. They'd had a bonfire the night before,
and
he'd cut himself. And I thought, my giddy aunt, I'm going to end up on some at-risk register, because their first impression.
But the people at A&E in the early days would have thought, well, this is a little worrying. But as the time went by, I think they'd have thought they wouldn't keep trolling him along here with his various injuries if it was them that was doing it. But no, he was a bit injury prone.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about Hosea last week, and you were talking about you read that amazing piece of God talking about the child. That was
as though he
Israel.
was looking through his photograph album. Yeah.
Well, I know that you wrote something else which was very much more about how social services might look, just as they might have looked at my grubby son.
Well, that's right. Well, it is a bit odd. I mean, I don't know if it's right to do this, but I wrote this ages ago.
When have you ever worried? Sorry.
Never.
Sorry.
This purports to be a letter from the social worker to Miss Osborne, who was the head social worker, reporting on Hosea's family. After quite a bit, it says, Hosea moved to the fathering of 3 offspring by Gomer, and it is their welfare that causes concern. Hosea's choice of names alone indicates that all 3 are at risk. Jezreel, the oldest boy, is named after a bloody and brutally inhuman massacre because he's the symbol of God's decision to destroy the community. The second child, a girl, is called Lo Ruhama, which means not loved.
Dear it.
Because she is the symbol of God's refusal to forgive the world in general. I mean, it's a bit heavy.
Awful.
Lo Ami, the second son, completes the set. His title conveys a message from God to all and sundry that they are not his people and he is not their God. Lo Ami doesn't get many party invites. I recommend a social worker be appointed immediately as Hosea the prophet and Gomer seem incapable of understanding that the God Hosea claims to represent would never allow children to be subjected to the hardship these 3 have endured. Yours, Vic Stapley. So it might be a little hard on Hosea, but it did seem...
No, but that is just, do you remember, Adrian, years and years ago when I was involved with running a club for some children from quite a tough background, and one of them was called JR and the other was called Rambo in the same family, and we always felt that probably those were not the ideal names. JR was, what was he from? Well, one of the was it Dynasty or the
Dynasty,
other one? Anyway,
one of them,
and Rambo, and we really did feel that they were being set up for not the easiest time in life because of their names, and very easy to look at them and maybe judge. by their names, judge their
suppose so,
parents
yeah,
by the
yeah.
names, or judge
Well,
the...
certainly if you're introduced to Rambo,
Yes.
you would, I suppose, have some sort of expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, a name is a name, isn't it? And it doesn't necessarily mean all that much. But I do think it is very, very easy for us to, whether it's a name, whether it's where people live, whether it's how they speak, we put together a jumble of things to form an opinion of somebody. And often, really, we've just got scraps of information, haven't we, that we kind of put together to form that composite image of somebody.
We have, and actually, in the case of Jesus, I think we've said everything before, but I think we have made the point that a lot of people have settled on what they remember about Jesus from the Gospels, and I've done that. And suddenly, someone says, "Do you remember this verse, or have you read that?" Or and you realise you actually either you've not read it, or, which is more likely, you've read it, but because it doesn't quite flow with what you want him to be or what you think he should be, you kind of shelve that for the time being. In fact, I wrote a book called Blind Spots in the Bible, which was about exactly that, the bits where you say, I can hardly see this because it's so difficult to handle.
It doesn't fit with what I want it to be.
And I think that's always been a feature of assessing the way God is with people, and Jesus was with people.
Well, do you remember last week I was I think you set me up for talking about a nightmare moment when I was supposed to be taking a photo of I can't remember his first name. Nigel Mansell, that's right.
Racing driver.
Yes, I know he was a racing driver.
Yeah, but other people might not.
I was trying to get the picture for my sons, and we were in a queue, and you only got a moment in front of him. And at that moment, my camera jammed, and he took the camera, and he took a photo of me by mistake instead. So I have a picture of me taken by Nigel Mansell. But in a way, there's something about that, because we talk about how Jesus would look. But Jesus was always looking outwards. I don't think he was probably very worried about how he came across as much as how other people did. So other people saw Zacchaeus, other people saw Matthew, other people saw this woman in this situation where she had been taken in adultery. It doesn't sound to me as though she had a lot of choice. And Jesus looked at people, and the photo that he took in that moment was of what they could become. Do you think that's true? What they were really inside, what they had the potential to be?
Yeah, I think that probably is true. Yeah, I'm just wrestling with the idea of Jesus and Nigel Mansell. I suppose. No.
Well, he will have looked at Nigel Mansell and seen the man he could become.
He would
no
indeed.
doubt.
Yeah. No, I do think that what you're saying is. Jesus was more likely to take a photo of somebody else than have one taken of himself.
I think so.
And years and years and years and years and years ago, as you know, when I was just a little boy, that phrase "everybody is I" became crucially important to me, although I had no idea what it meant. And I worked out that it meant everybody in the world is the most important person in the world. In their own mind. So
it's an extraordinary thing, Adrian, that Jesus would be looking at the situation, for example, in India at the moment. We've been connected, haven't we, with a charity that works with street children over the years, and the street children who are considered just to be vermin anyway, where do they stand in the whole COVID crisis? And if we actually think of everybody as I, then Jesus, then God our Father is looking at every single one of those children, every single one of those people in the hospitals, every single one of those doctors trying to cope, and the people driving miles to get oxygen. And he's looking at them. That's the way round his focus would be.
Yeah, it's almost too awful to watch at the moment, isn't it? The film from India. And I hope people are helping. We can help in all sorts of ways. Certainly financially at the moment, it's possible to lend some aid to that.
Yeah.
But it hurts, and I find myself thinking, We've had our 2 jabs. I've had my 2 jabs.
Yeah,
You've had
of
yours.
course we have, and rightly so.
Yes,
We
of
should be
course, yeah.
rejoicing in that, for goodness
just,
sake.
It just is a terrible thing to watch.
It is. But it's just a bit of a challenge, isn't it, if we are really to look through Jesus' eyes.
I have to say, the whole thing about seeing Jesus, about a photo.
Yeah.
I think one of the people who wrote said they'd like to have a selfie with him.
Yes.
I think that's what I'd like.
Yeah.
I
think he would like to have a selfie with you and with the person that. I mean,
No, just me. No. I don't want anyone else to that. No,
I didn't mean it like that. I was trying to say something profound. I meant that I think that's if you take the focus of Jesus to be the love he has for you, for all the people who've written, for every child in India, then I think he would. If cameras were around, he'd say, "All right, then."
There is a dimension of unease in most Christians about their security with God, and I think many people believe it would be good to have that kind of reality, but obviously for some reason it's not to be. So I'm just glad that I do believe in him, and I do. And my hope hasn't disappeared at all.
And how lovely to hear that sometimes the Holy Spirit can give you a glimpse at times of quiet thinking or whatever. But we would love to hear your views about this, because as you've probably gathered, we don't have 100% certainty about whether or not anything. Anything.
Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear.
We would.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.